Tonight's lecture is on fearless fundraising, and this is basically the art of the ask. This is one of the most important things that you can learn in fundraising, and how to be comfortable with actually asking for money and asking for support for your organization. So let's continue. In this slide set, we're going to learn a few things that will help you in moving toward an ask. We'll learn about fundraising as an art. We'll learn some interesting terminology along the way, such as prospect and donors. We'll learn about the process, which we used to say is the method to our madness. We'll learn about giving groups and how to move and to make the ask, and some other interesting things along the way. Some of the terminology that you'll need to be familiar with, especially if you're doing this professionally, are the word prospect, which is the potential donor to your organization. The donor, which could be an individual, corporation, foundation, or other entity that supports your organization financially, and this could be with outright cash or maybe a gift in kind. Next is a prospect research. This is a verb, and this is the act of doing fundraising research on an entity, could be any one of the entities mentioned above as a donor, to learn relevant information that will allow you to effectively connect to this individual and cultivate them further, which we'll get to the word cultivate. And then on our campus, we have somebody called the prospect researcher, which is our investigator, or also affectionately known as our snoop. When you are moving to an ask, it is part of a process, a solicitation process. And here I have a graphic that we can use to illustrate how individuals come into the cycle and move through the cycle as they are being asked. One, you have to identify the prospect. You need to identify with who they are, learn more about them. The next step is to communicate, which is to tell them a little bit about your organization, listen and learn from them, learn more about who they are as an individual, cultivate them, engage them with your organization, what you do, what makes your organization tick, get to know them better, develop a solid relationship, and once that has taken a certain amount of time and the relationship is solid, that is when you solicit them or you ask them for a gift. After that, you thank them. The thanking process is referred to as stewardship, and then the cycle continues over and over again. Research has shown that it is more cost efficient to keep a donor in that cycle so that after you steward them, you continue to cultivate them, thus shortening the cycle itself and retaining the donor as a long-term friend to your organization. There are 5 basic types of prospects. There are those who have a big, generous heart. They see the need, they don't need to be asked, and they just open their wallets and they support. There are those who respond when they are told. Many times this is out of obligation. There are those that need to be persuaded, but they will respond. I personally fall into that category. We've made jokes about this. It's the baby boomer process. We need to be convinced. Then there are the may or may nots. Those are your wild cards, very difficult to tell which way they'll go. And then number 5 is what I call the inert fifth. These are individuals who, doesn't matter what you do, they won't be giving to your organization. They just literally don't let you know one way or another where the wind blows. In order for someone to be the right prospect for your organization, to make them into the next stage, which is a donor, they need to have what I call the 3 magic ingredients. Affinity, meaning they need to know who you are, they need to like you, they need to have a positive soft spot in their heart for you and your organization. They need to have a philanthropic spirit. They need to have a giving heart. They need to be generous. Third, they need to have financial ability. You can be as philanthropic as possible. If you don't have any money, it's very difficult for someone to give of themselves financially. However, I do find that folks who have great affinity and philanthropic spirit make great volunteers, and then in time, perhaps they can grow into, if their circumstances permit, can grow into a financial donor. So never discount people from that, but do be mindful that all 3 are necessary for someone to be a major gift prospect. It is what you know, and knowledge is key here. You need to know your organization well. You need to know the material that you have that you give to a donor. You need to understand every single thing about your organization, both its pride points as well as its flaws. You need to know the donor and their own personal information. You need to know how to express the amount. You need to know your team, the people that you go with to ask the donor for money. Many times development officers and development professionals will end up going with a executive director or a dean or somebody in a supervisorial position who can speak with more authority about the organization. So make sure you know them well and you've rehearsed. And then know yourself. Many times it's a great idea to make your own gift first to the organization because it puts you in more of a peer-to-peer role. I put this slide in here because that process that you saw earlier, the cycle, takes a great deal of time in many cases, especially if you're working on major gift process. So patience is also key, and being really aware of the timing with your donor. I threw this little character in here. In fact, this is something that a friend of mine found and gave it to me, and it's really interesting. It's a Chinese character for listening. And we like to put this in here because it shows that listening requires more than just your ears. It requires you to listen with your ears, to treat the donor as a king, to listen with your heart, one single focus, and then the key here is to one single focus and focus of itself, and then multiply that times 10. So it requires a great deal of focus. So I really like this because it really depicts that listening is critical to fundraising. So in order for you to get out there and make the ask, you're going to have to get the visit. Getting to the visit itself is 85% of your success, getting in to actually see the prospect. So what I like to recommend here is that before you make the call, consider the prospect and focus. Keep small talk brief. Have the time of day and place in mind. Minimize distractions. Practice the conversation that you have on the phone. Have your calendar handy so that you're ready to actually fill in a date. Be ready, call to set the appointment. Court the gatekeeper. If they've got a secretary or somebody, make sure you're very sweet to them because this person can make or break your appointment. Talk about the time needed and be respectful of their time. You don't want this to become a social setting type chitty chat. You need to get to the point, and you need to realize most people who are major gift prospects are also very busy people. Establish a firm date while you have them on the line and then confirm it with a letter or an email. Remember that this is a joyful pursuit. This is actually a happy thing. Many times when you ask for a gift, the donor is usually the happiest person in the room, which is something I put on this slide. Think about building a rapport and common ground. Be interesting and interested. Ask open-ended questions. Acknowledge that you both care about the organization. By the time you get to the ask, we're assuming that you have a relationship with this individual and the individual has a relationship with your organization. Acknowledge their dedication to the mission. Remember that, again, that the happiest person in the room is usually the donor. Probe, prod, and please, please, please remember to listen because this is critical. Present the opportunity. This is where you talk about the investment that they potentially could make to your organization. I like a team approach, and I think it's great if you can give some kind of a testimony to tell the story of your organization with passion, to talk about the impact that your organization has on your constituency group. Remember always above everything that you are inviting them to join you in the organization's mission. The way that I like to say it is, I'd like you to consider X amount for X purpose. Do not forget to state an amount. Don't give a range because it'll always go low, and to state a purpose. You can't just ask for general support. In many cases, donors like to have something specific, and this will benefit you in the long run because you'll be able to talk about later on after you get the money what you did with it, because you can't just have general purposes are really actually the kiss of death in many cases. Next, don't fill the silence. He who speaks first loses. Let the person sit with the amount. There's a great temptation to fill the silence. Well, if you think that amount's too high, but if you don't, making excuses, let them sit with the amount. It's actually flattering to ask for a high amount. And remember, if they say no, objections are your best friend. Many times why they say no is really not about you. Many times it's mismatched project or interests, mismatched solicitors, either too much or, believe it or not enough. One of the big ones is actually failing to state an amount in the ask, failure to convey a sense of urgency. If there's been a lot of research that shows that in general, people are motivated with even a small sense of urgency, because if they think they have time, they will use the time. Another one that's very common is spouse, sibling, and children's approval. When you are making major gift asks, it's normal that these types of decisions require spousal consideration or siblings, especially if you're working with estate plans. Being too general or too vague is also the kiss of death. You want to be specific. And also being fundraising driven. Having no passion for the organization and just being motivated by the bottom right-hand column really does not motivate donors. And remember that in many cases, you need to listen. So failing to listen to the donors will actually cause you to have a problem in getting to the yes. Decisions are based 76% on what they say and only 37% on what you say. I've heard a lot of young fundraisers talk about blaming themselves for this, and a lot of times we go through this, but if you're going to play the blame game, which we say, we don't really advocate this. Many times you didn't get the gift because you didn't make the call, you didn't prepare or rehearse, you didn't have a strategy or an objective, or you failed to assume too much, or you just assumed too much in general. You failed to probe, or you didn't listen. You asked too soon. I've actually had this happen to me, which is called a shut up and go away gift. When you haven't cultivated the relationship completely, in many cases you'll get what is called a shut up and go away gift, which usually ends up being only a fraction of what you are looking for. Or worst of all, you didn't ask at all. Most of all, and over above everything, I want each of you to be confident and get out there and ask. In your assignment, in your discussion boards, I've asked each of you to go out and find someone in your either peer group or at your organization that you can ask for support. I'm not advocating that you go out and ask for a $50,000 gift. However, if you do, bravo for you. But I want you to try going out and asking if you haven't done it. The other thing that I would like you to do is to take either your iPhone or your iPad or your computer camera and record for me you asking me for money for your organization. This can be your fictitious organization or a real organization that you're passionate about. You know, just a couple quick seconds, maybe 60 seconds of asking me, and just so you can practice and get used to it. Remember, be comfortable with what you're saying. It has to roll out of your mouth. Be confident, because oftentimes the hardest part is getting to your first ask. After that, it's a piece of cake. So I wish you all good luck, and I can't wait to see your videos. Have a great one.